Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed.
What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackballed. Noah, Anna Grace, Dawn, Vicky, Charlotte, Jack, Olivia, Mary, Dylan, Catherine, ABL, Jessica, Rachel, James, Josephine, Caroline, Lauren, Ben, Madeline, Jesse, Allison, Chase, Daniel, Anne-Marie, Grace, Emily. Those are these people. The children, I hope I make it through this podcast, by the way. The children who were savagely gunned down in Sandy Hook 10 years ago today. I don't know about you guys, but when that news broke, I was stunned, I guess, shocked. I didn't have kids yet. I didn't have to, though. There was just a complete sense of this didn't need to happen. What the hell is going on with that country? Why is this stuff still happening? And why is it happening to kids? Like kids that are just going to school. And it doesn't feel like America's really learned their lesson. In fact, I know they haven't. There have been hundreds of mass shootings, actually thousands. I think it's 2,800 since Sandy Hook, which is just a ridiculous number in and of itself. Tens of thousands of people dying senselessly in a country that has decided that a Second Amendment that was drafted when muskets were still the badass firearm, ingrained in their culture, stitched in the fabric of their society, are gun rights, the right to bear arms. However you want, whichever way you want to decipher or define that Second Amendment, that's where they are in America right now. And I thought it might be a good idea to hold almost like an impromptu podcast. This was not planned. I hadn't been planning this for weeks. I actually woke up today and saw on Twitter that today was the anniversary. And I started going through some of the footage and some of the old articles that were describing sort of the scene that day. And, there have been, Columbine was the first one I remember. I guess I was just out of high school. I think I was in second or third year of college, and that came out. And that was crazy. I don't remember a mass shooting before Columbine. And I remember everyone saying at the time, like the sort of go-to line was like, will a tragedy like this ever strike America again? Like, this is crazy. And then we just we kept on seeing it over and over again. And so what I thought I would do is just have sort of like an open discussion just about guns, about America's sort of problem with guns, the Second Amendment. And now in Canada, he's not my favorite prime minister, but I don't really fault the prime minister for wanting to put more gun control laws on the books. I really don't. We had our own mass shootings over the last few years. And, I don't care what his motivation is. I don't care if it's politics. I don't care if it's not really about gun victims. I don't care. I don't like guns. I swear. I think I am probably the most progressive person I know when it comes to guns. I don't like them. I don't like handguns. I don't think anyone really needs a gun anymore. If you want to go and if you live in the if you live in the sticks and you want to shoot a deer and put it in your freezer, okay, fine. Can't you just have some sort of standard 22. I don't know. I don't know why guns have to be a fashion accessory to go along with a weapon of destruction. So I've invited a bunch of my friends to just come and discuss guns. It's an open discussion. There is no format. And first, I would like to welcome to the show from the Eager Beager podcast, Paul Atkinson. Paul, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, brother. I'm good. That opening kind of punched me in the gut. You said all their names, you showed all their faces, and I can't believe it's been 10 years, and yet here we are.
Yeah,
You
10
know,
years.
it's I don't have children. I'll never have children. I'm 54 years old. I'm not going to start having them now, but I have nieces, I have nephews, I have cousins, I have friends who have children, and each one of those innocent, beautiful faces was destroyed before they had a chance at life. And God damn it, if you don't have emotions over that, you've lost
Yeah,
your humanity.
yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
and it was.
yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
I was gonna say. You said talked about how Trudeau's not your favorite prime minister. You don't really care for the man, but you completely support him on this one. And it's surprising the amount of people that come out of the woodwork and have said lately, "Look, man, I don't care for the guy, but I'm not going to get mad about this one." It, why do you need a handgun? Why do you need a pistol? Why do you need a semi-auto? Why do you need a magazine that holds more than 5 rounds? Um, there's an ancient First Nations or Indigenous saying that he whose rifle needs more than 5 rounds is a terrible hunter. That's kind of a joke, but I mean, I mean, my father only ever when he was my father was a hunter. He's 81 now, so he doesn't hunt anymore. He goes out to the bush with the guys at the hunt camp and sits around the camp, drinks beer, plays guitar, cooks some food. But he was a bolt action rifle guy because if you literally the first shot you fire at a deer, if you don't get a deer or a moose with the first shot, by the time you get to crack off another one, it's gone.
Yeah,
So why do you need a magazine? You don't. You don't. I mean, he grew up on a farm, so they had rifles to scare away coyotes or whatever how you want to pronounce it, wolves and whatever from cattle and livestock. But that to them was not a weapon for protection. It was a tool to use for farming
hmm yeah,
or hunting, to provide meat. And I mean, we talk about Sandy Hook, and I had to. Do you know who Dan Hodges is?
no, not offhand.
Okay,
I
he's a
might,
fella
I
on.
might if you give me, if you spur my memory here.
So I'll do my best to do that. He's a fella on Twitter. Years ago, back in 2015, he tweeted. It was June 19th, 2015, is when he tweeted this, and he said, and this is hard. This is hard because a lot of people got bent out of shape for it. But what he said is accurate. In retrospect, Sandy Hook marked the end of the U.S. gun control debate. Once
Hmm.
America decided killing children was bearable, it was over. And I mean, I get choked up thinking about it, but it's like, tell me he's wrong.
Yeah, I don't remember him saying that by the name that you just mentioned. Dan Hodges, was it?
Dan Hodges, yeah.
I remember that sentiment floating around, though. I remember people saying, look, if this isn't going to do it.
Nothing will.
Yeah.
Nothing will.
Because the NRA didn't even take a break from that one.
No.
The NRA, every time a mass shooting happens, the NRA comes out and they start talking about if there was a good person with a gun there, or this is just proves that we need more guns and all this. And I'm just like, the most tone deaf organization I can think of, but they appeal to a lot of tone deaf people.
They do. They're very professional at doing what they do. They've been doing it for a very long time. They are well versed in nebulizing human emotions when it comes to somebody's going to take your rights away from you. I'm like, again, one of the framers of the Constitution said we need to revisit this every 20 years and adapt it as time changes, as humanity advances. That was Thomas Jefferson who said that.
Yeah.
And they're still going back to, well, in 17, oh, for Christ's sake, that was a musket. And they also forget the end part of that, a well-regulated militia. It was
Yeah.
not it was not designed so everybody could have a 50 caliber semi-auto in their home. It was, the right to bear arms and a well-regulated militia in the event that the King of England wanted to try and invade once again
Hmm.
in seven in the 1770s. I mean, good God. You want to be an advanced nation, but you're still living in the past.
Yeah, I don't know if it was. I think it was Bowling for Columbine, the
Mhm.
Michael Moore documentary, where he was at that ranch. I think it was in Michigan. It was like Timothy McVeigh's like cousin or something like that. He was a guy that I think actually served some time from the Oklahoma City bombing
Right.
that Timothy McVeigh was responsible for. I think it was because he sold fertilizer. I honestly don't remember, but this guy was connected to McVeigh somehow. And Michael Moore was talking to him, and he was that kind of batshit gun toting libertarian kind of guy. And I think Michael Moore posed him a question that was like, "Well, what is too much? Like, what weapon would be too much? A tactical nuke? Would that be too much?" I think the guy joked at first and was like, "Yeah, I think everyone should have a tactical nuke." But then when he stopped, when he realized how stupid he sounded, he's like, "No, no, no, of course not." So there is even on the insane people, they're like the gun nuts. There is a cap, right?
Mhm.
Where that cap needs to come down. I mean, I've heard people talk about how an AR-15 is not technically an assault weapon. Who gives a fuck whether or not it's classified as an assault weapon? Who cares?
Yeah.
I don't care. I know that it's remarkably easy to use, and a round goes off as quickly as you can squeeze the trigger, and it's durable in the sense that it's easy to handle and lightweight and all that. I mean, I don't care if you call it an assault weapon. It's a fuckery weapon, whatever it is. Like it doesn't matter. So people get caught up in these terminologies and these categorizations of weapons, and it's just like, I don't know. I feel like if America, it's too late for America. By the way, you
Oh,
cannot.
it's done. It's done.
Yeah, I mean, it's too late in the sense that you're not going to be able to like say, okay, America, no more guns. That's never going to happen.
Never.
But why can't in some sort of utopian America, there be like, okay, here's your standard issue handgun, here's your standard issue shotgun or rifle, and that's it. That's it. That's what you get.
Yeah.
And so everyone knows. I like the idea of smart guns, where you hold the handle and it takes your print and you're the only person that can use it. I like those ideas. But Jesus Christ, like it's such a big business. And you have this country that can't seem to get enough of them. The Obama years, the NRA scared the shit out of like gun happy Americans to the point where they sold more guns during the Obama years than they had the previous like 50 or something.
Oh,
like
yeah.
that. It's
It was
an insane
insane.
number.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I like to think of myself as somewhat of an optimist. I really do.
Mhm.
Like I like to feel like I'm an optimistic person. I don't really have an optimistic thought when it comes to the United States, when it comes to this issue.
Well, you know, I don't either, and I think it's because of the sheer overall numbers of people who think that I need to get a gun. I should slide out of the chute, and as soon as I can walk, I should have a pistol in my hand. Like one of my dearest friends on planet Earth lives in Switzerland, and she's from Ottawa, but she lived in Geneva for 15 years, and she's been she was in Frankfurt for a couple, and now she's in Zurich with her husband. Two of the sweetest people you'll ever meet in the world, in a country where everybody over the age of 18 who is able to does mandatory military service.
Mhm.
You also realize that everybody over the age of 18 who has done their mandatory military service is handed a fully automatic weapon. And you keep that for life. You keep it for life. Now, when they hand you the weapon, and in the event of war or whatever the case may be, you would have to go and get ammunition. But you have the weapon at home. The firearm is in your possession. Everyone over the age of 18 in a nation of 8 million people owns an automatic weapon. Very high amount of gun ownership in the country. Now, I say everybody over the age of 18. Some people are incapable of serving because physical abilities or mental capability, whatever the case may be. So it's not every single human being in that nation. But the amount of gun ownership in Switzerland is ridiculously high. Here's the interesting fact: they don't have gun crime like Canada does, or the United States is, that's an outlier. Let's not even consider them for a second. They have lower gun crime rates than Canada does. Why? Because everybody that's in that country is trained on how to use a weapon and what a weapon is used for. And the fact that it is something that is designed to take a life, whether it be a human life or a mammal of some type, it is designed to end life, period. That's all it's used for, unless you fire it into the sky and you might take a life, because if the bullet lands on an innocent bystander or an animal, or it could hit a bird, it right?
Yeah.
A gun is designed to kill. That's it. That's its only useful purpose. Nothing more.
So they don't give them ammunition?
You are issued ammunition when you're in the military, but when you leave the military, they issue you the magazines and the weapon. And I'd have to double check on the amount of, like, you are. I think you're issued 30 rounds, but don't quote me on that. So,
Okay, yeah.
like you don't have like 100,000 rounds of ammunition ready to go to war tomorrow, sort of thing.
Are you all that familiar with the new Justin Trudeau? Was it Bill C-21? I think it is.
Yeah, and it's complicated. We did a show on the True North Eagle Beaver about that, and Douglas did a lot of the research because he's he's a communications guy, right? Like, he reads everything he can, and we had a long conversation about it. And I talked about how, well, look, what I understand of the bill is there are going to be prohibited weapons that there already are, and restricted firearms. Now, restricted means you can still own the weapon, but you have to follow the restrictions. Prohibited means that's it. You can't even own it. So, like, a clip or a magazine in this country cannot hold more than 5 rounds. A shotgun, a 12 gauge shotgun, as an example, is only capable of holding 3 rounds. Now, you can modify that very, 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 very easily, because they have a thing called a plug. And the plug basically takes up the space of 2 shotgun shells. You take the weapon apart, you remove the plug, and you can shove 5 shells in there. But a 12 gauge shotgun is only good at close range. Beyond 50 feet, it's an ineffective weapon, because it's designed for birds, right?
Is that what they're designed for?
Well, shotguns are designed for birds.
See,
They're
we
foul.
grew up in North America. I know this is going to sound like a joke, but I thought they were designed for Crips. I'm not kidding. Like, I'm just saying.
No, get it.
We're
get
from here,
it.
and the sawed-off part. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Does that increase the spread? I don't even know what the sawed-off part is supposed to do.
It does. It increases the spread, but at close range. So if somebody within, and again, I don't own a weapon, but I've taken a lot of weapon safety courses, because my father was a hunter, and he, thought I might follow, and so I took all the courses. And knowledge is power. I'm licensed to own. I don't have an FAC, but I could very easily purchase a weapon or a firearm in New Brunswick, Quebec, or Ontario, because I've taken all the courses, the prerequisite courses that one needs to take. That being said, a sawed-off shotgun is designed to release a giant slug at close range to make a bigger hole. But the further away you get, the less effective it is to harm a human being. But if you have a 12 gauge shotgun in your home and somebody comes into your home and you just make that sound, click, click, everybody on earth knows what that sound is. We've all seen the movies. That sound is real. That loading of the shotgun, somebody's out of there.
It's like a barking dog.
There was a buddy of mine was telling me he was in Vegas and he was at a range, and they sold guns at the range, and he said they were trying to sell me a 12 gauge, and I'm like, no, I live in Canada, I can't take it across the border with me. He goes, well, you got to remember, if you get back home to Canada, you need to get a 12 gauge. All you got to do, you don't even ever have to load it. You don't even need shotgun shells. All you got to do is just cock it once, and that's more than enough. I'm like, yeah, you hear that sound, you're getting the hell out of wherever you are.
Yeah.
because inside of a home, if you fire that off, two things are going to happen. One, you're going to blow a hole in somebody about this big, because the wadding, the paper, the shell, everything that comes out is about the size of a beer can, approximately, when it spreads at close range. The further away you get it, the further it spreads. Number one. Number two, you're going to go deaf. Because if you fire a weapon indoors and you do not have hearing protection, somebody's losing their hearing.
Yeah, I fired a 12 gauge outside once. So I live in the sticks now.
Mm-hmm.
I held a gun once, I think, before I was 40, like a Beretta someone had. And then I wiped my prints off of it because I was like, wait a second, what?
This
why'd I
is
do that?
not.
Yeah. And then my brother-in-law, who's kind of I'll be honest, like he's kind of a mega guy, like he's one of those guys, hunter and everything, hunts the animals that you shouldn't hunt because he doesn't eat them, grizzlies and shit, like just one of those dicks. And anyways, my father-in-law has a collection of guns, and so one day he was out shooting, and I just kind of walked out to him. I was like, what the hell are you doing? And I think it was before I had kids. Maybe my son was a baby or something, but he asked me if I wanted to fire it. And I actually was kind of curious just to see what it was like. I wasn't like, yeah, man, I totally want to fire. I was like kind of hesitant. I was like, okay. And I fired this 12 gauge. I hit my target, but the fucking gun, like it bruised my rotator cuff.
Oh yeah.
I felt like the gun almost kind of for a moment, like I had to catch it again. Like I fired it and it felt like it was like, it was out of my grip for a millisecond, and then I had to hold it back onto it again. It kicked back, and he's like, "Good shot, man! You hit your target." And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "You want to do another?" I'm like, "No, nope. I don't think so."
No, I need a massage, and
well,
maybe
it wasn't even that. It was just like I don't have that part of me that it gets an adrenaline rush from firing a weapon. Like I fired 22s. I think it was the same day or the same weekend. And 22s, I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. It's kind of like a cap gun, like compared to the 12 gauge. It's almost nothing. There's no kick. It was just like whatever it was that I was using was just a simple little 22, little tiny rifle. And I was fine. But there wasn't a part of me like I've talked to Americans, people that I used to be friends with, that speak about handguns. Like they're talking about the way some people talk about holding a big wad of money. It just makes them feel something, that is, I don't know, like that makes them feel powerful, I guess. Also, you're frozen, so I'm going to just kick you out and then allow you to get back in. And while I do that, Army Chris from the Fire and Effect podcast, how you doing, buddy?
I'm not bad. Yourself, James?
I'm doing well, sir. Thank you for joining us. I know that you're going to have a totally different take on this, but I know it's still going to be sensible because you're a soldier. And I know that you believe in responsibility when it comes to weapons. So it's the 10th anniversary of Sandy Hook. We're just sort of talking about guns. I don't know if you heard any of the discussion so far, but if you'd like to give me your thoughts on what, first of all, give me your Trudeau thoughts on Bill C-21 and why you think it's ridiculous, because I know you probably do.
I do and I don't. I've always, so we're explicitly clear, I've said this on my own pod before. I do believe in gun control. I do believe that your average person does not need an AR-15, and even though it's something I grew up with in my career. But what's happening now is theatrics. It's a theatrical, and if I'm repeating something you guys already discussed, please cut me off. There is nothing within Bill C-21 that is going to impact gun violence in Canada. Nothing.
Why is that?
Because the amount of money being thrown at, and I have friends who I can't name that are members of the RCMP and other police agencies, they've all said it. The gun violence problem in Canada is because of cross-border gun smuggling. It has nothing to do with responsible gun ownership. If you look at the evolution of Bill C-21, the first, when the AR-15 platform or military-style assault rifles were banned, that was in response to what happened in Nova Scotia, and then we find out later that all those weapons were smuggled from the United States. Then we had the last iteration with the handgun ban after the tragedy in Texas, which is an imported American problem into Canada. We don't have mass school shootings here, definitely not even close to the scale that occur in the United States. It's an imported problem to perpetuate an agenda that is not the problem. And then if you looked at the funding being allocated, and I don't have the figures in front of me, I do apologize, to CBSA, which is the Canadian Border Services Agency, and the RCMP to manage cross-border gun smuggling is a pittance in comparison to what the government will spend to buy back guns from responsible gun owners. It just doesn't make any sense.
Is there a point, like a greater point, I guess, that the government is trying to make regarding how some weapons make it just really easy to take down a lot of people in a short amount of time?
That's the theory behind it, for sure, and I'm not against that. Like, I understand that as a former military guy that owns several of those weapons that have been banned, well, not several, but a couple, why your average person needs this gun. Sure, they don't need those guns. Don't need to be on the streets. And I know the flip side argument for the gun enthusiasts that enjoy recreational shooting and competition shooting, and I respect that. And that's their perspective, that, oh, if we take all these guns that really have no function, I mean, Prime Minister Trudeau's platform when this thing kicked off was that, and I quote, "You do not need an AR-15 to take down a deer." Okay, that's a fair statement. Yet he waffled on the Indigenous piece and their hunting rights, and the Indigenous population of the country is still allowed to have those weapons, which contradicts his statement. So that's one thing, but that's vote buying. We all understand what that looks like. Fair enough. And then he went on the just last spring, he prohibited pistols, and that's up in the air. And then slid under the table this latest very controversial and very convoluted ban on, I couldn't even count. Nobody knows, from myself to other gun guys to the police, of what's banned and what's not and why, because now hunters are being impacted. And to me, it's like, that is not going to solve gun violence problems in this country, or any country for that matter.
Paul?
Well, you know more about weapons than I ever. Hey, Chris, how you doing, brother? You know more about weapons than I ever will. I mean, you've been in battle. You've seen things that I would hope to never see. That being said, one of the things, and we did talk about this on the podcast the other day, about how they shot themselves in the foot. They scored an own goal. The ideology behind what they want to do is good, but they've gone about it in not the best possible way, right?
Agreed.
And there are certain political parties in this country who are spinning things out of control in the worst possible way by saying they're coming to take your guns, when that's not the case.
I agree with that.
Nobody's coming to take anyone's guns. They're going to put restrictions on certain weapons, and there's problems with how it's like, well, you can't use that weapon because it has a sniper scope. Yeah, but it's not a sniper rifle. So there's a lot of convoluted aspects of the bill that do need to be worked out by individuals who have much more insight into this than I ever will. One of our colleagues, Hugh Culleton, who is writing for the Dean Bladell Network, who is an educator, and we interviewed him not too long ago. He's a former naval officer, a soldier. He never served in combat, but sorry, I've got my computer dying and my phone dying here, but I'll stay on as long as I can. He never served in combat, but he has an incredible knowledge. He owns a rifle range. He shoots weapons, and he's invited myself and Douglas to the range, and we're like, yeah, we'll come out. We'll fire a couple of rounds off. He's a responsible gun owner. My father is a responsible gun owner. Me, do I like guns? No, not personally. I am actually a very good shot because I've gone to the range in the past and fired at targets. And they're like, how did you do that? And I go, hold your breath, slow your heart rate, calm yourself down, and squeeze the trigger. It's not rocket surgery. But not everybody is capable of that.
Did you say rocket surgery?
Yeah, it's like brain science.
Yeah.
It's a trailer park boys, not rocket appliances.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was an intentional or not, but
I got that. I got that. Yeah.
Totally intentional. Worst case Ontario.
100%.
Right. But the thing is like like I talked about earlier, Switzerland, high gun ownership. I've gone to Plain Palais in Geneva, where they have this giant market on Wednesdays and Sundays. And it's like, so think of the Stittsville Flea Market. James, are you familiar with the former Stittsville Flea Market?
Nope.
Okay. So think of a flea market where there's like 3,000 tables set up, 3,000 booths. And this is Plain Palais in Geneva. And one of the booths goes, I'm a watch guy. So one guy's got like thousands of watches, and I bought a couple from him. Some were beat to hell, and I spent money to get them fixed up and repaired. And like a beat up old Rolex that I bought for like $500, 500 Swiss francs at the time, is worth a lot of money, but I didn't replace it with proper Rolex parts. So now it's basically worthless, but it was an authentic thing. Then the next table over to him, he's got fully automatic weapons. He's got a 50 cal. He's got like literally, what do you want to buy? And it's legal to purchase these for Swiss citizens that don't have a record. I'm not a Swiss citizen. I don't have a record, but I'm not a Swiss citizen. So I could look at all the guns and he'd tell me all about them. But anybody who walked out of there with it was not going to go and mow people down. I have sat in a pub and watched a fella show up in Geneva, downtown Geneva, one of the wealthiest cities on earth. A fella shows up in his fatigues with shoulder-length hair and his ears pierced and all kinds of tattoos because he's already done his service. But up to the age of, now, Chris, you may or may not know this because I can't remember what the date is. Up to the age of 40, you have to do, 2 weeks a year, every 5 years or something like that in Switzerland?
Yes, they have a compulsory service thing.
Yeah, after you've done your mandatory, it's for a number of years. And anyway, so I'm sitting in the pub and 5 guys walk in, shoulder-length hair, earrings, tattoos, in fatigues with automatic weapons on their back. And I'm like, what the hell? And they're like, oh no, they're just stopping off for a pint before they go home. I'm like, this is normal? Well, yeah, they do their service, they do their 2 weeks or whatever the heck it is, whoever their employer is. Some of these guys are bankers, right? Yeah. Who make more money than I've ever seen. They go, they do their 2 weeks, they'll stop off at the pub on the way home, ride their 10-speed with their backpack and a fully automatic weapon. And people are not getting mowed down in the streets because A, responsible gun ownership, B, proper training, and learning that it is a weapon of death. It's not a toy. And when you pull the trigger, people fall down and they don't get back up.
Yeah, and it starts with proper training. And like, again, because everybody assumes, right? Because we're so polarized when it comes to politics that. Because I live in Alberta, I have a short haircut, I wear a camouflage ball hat, drive a pickup truck, and I like guns, that I'm this right-wing gun nut. I'm like, no, I'm actually not. I think
you're not.
That this entire Bill C-21 is a complete fiasco. However, if you want to talk about gun control, we've always had good gun control in this country. We've always have. To get a restricted firearm, you need to have a background check done. Right, that other countries such as the United States, with all their problems with gun violence, don't unilaterally apply across all states because of the way the system works down there. And that's
where they purchase the gun, right? If you purchase as a gun show versus,
I'm going to tell you an Arizona story later, James, when I'm done this, about how easy it is to get guns down there because of my dad had a house. There's a waiting period from when you purchase the gun. It's not like the Homer Simpson, I'm mad now.
Yeah, exactly.
If you go in and buy a restricted firearm, which is say an AR-15 or a pistol, You don't just walk out with it. It's a couple days minimum. It was up to a week, depending on the time frame and however it all worked. There's a process is in place, and you had to take a course. Now, I don't think the course is adequate. I did weeks of weapons training before I pulled an actual trigger when I joined the military. Now you take this little 2-day course and off you go to the races. Separate conversation. Now you contrast that with, and I'm picking on Arizona here, not the entire United States because it's different all the way. But I was down in the United States, and Arizona has one of the loosest set of gun laws in the entire country. And we were in a gun shop, and there was this old Vietnam vet. He knew I was a military guy. I said, so how do I get a gun down here as a non-citizen? My dad's got a house. We're down here twice a year. He goes, you just go downtown, show them your power bill. They give you a residency license, and then you can come in and buy a gun. There's no background checks. That's in a gun shop. You can go to a swap meet behind their version of the Legion every Saturday. And like you said, tables laid out from Rolexes to AR-15s to AK-47s, no ID, hand the guy cash, and walk out. And you wonder why you might have some problems.
Yeah.
And I'm a gun guy, but I'm going, there's something wrong with this. If you wonder why you have gun violence in that country and school shootings, it's a lack of background checks because you just they die on the Second Amendment. You know, the right,
literally.
It's like literally, they just it's the most important thing in their existence. You're not taking my guns. The NRA doesn't help because that's big business, and it's the accessibility of firearms for people who don't have background checks that may have, you know, mental health issues, whereas we don't have that up here. So just to come full circle and shut up, Canada has always had good gun control. And this Bill C-21 gong show that came out of nowhere is stems from Justin Trudeau hyperizing a problem that doesn't exist. From the Nova Scotia shootings to the school shooting in Texas, and then pushing these bills through without proper process.
Yeah,
and they're not real problems.
To both your points, and then I'm going to bring in another guest because it'll be a total sort of contrast as to what we're talking about right now, because he's from New Zealand. But to both your points, the training I think is important. Honestly, Chris, I support a country that won't let me have a gun, but will let you because of your military background. I don't care.
That's where I've been called biased, but that's exactly what I think. Like, I'm comfortable having an AR-15 here, but do I think that my neighbor should? No.
Hell no.
No.
So that might sound biased. I'll eat that. That's okay. I'm good with that.
I think biases are good sometimes. I want to bring in just sort of a different perspective here. Braden Simmons, welcome to Blackballed. You live in New Zealand, and you have had I mean, there has been a national tragedy that took place in New Zealand not too long ago. Can you tell me how that has sort of changed gun laws in your country, if at all, and what your thoughts are on the reaction to that massacre?
Thanks, James. It's a complex issue, obviously. Now, the government first responded with an outright ban on semi-automatic weapons, which is not something that I personally think they should have done. The latest headlines, I was just doing some Googling before I came on, the latest headlines are that firearm injuries and deaths occurring at record rates. That's in the 31st of August this year. So, you know, that's a quick two-liner that you can throw at it, that it hasn't worked in terms of preventing gun crime. It is doing the next stage, which I think is something that I personally think is a good approach, is a gun registry. The problem with guns is in part, I mean, and Sandy Hook I think is a good example, where persons. I could be wrong, but I believe the shooter took that weapon from his mother legally owned. Right?
Yeah, I believe
That's correct.
So. Yeah,
it was a Bushmaster, which is an AR-15, a Glock 20, a 6-hour P226, and a Ruger 22.
Now, what accountability is there for his mother having allowed him, having used her guns, stored them in a way that this individual could access those guns? And I think it's a significant problem in New Zealand, where at the moment, for all of the bans, which I don't personally think are going to help, because the guns are off the legal market anyway. For all of the bans, gun owners can purchase guns and then sell them to individuals without that are not licensed, and that happens in New Zealand a lot. So that's how the gangs are getting guns, and that's why the crime is rising. There's other factors going on, but if you've got a gun registry, so the gun, which is very similar to what we do with vehicles, right? Vehicles can be used as lethal weapons. The terror attack in Nice showed us that. But there's accountability because the owner can be held accountable for what that vehicle is used for. And I think that's important. And that's where we're going next. So if you own a gun, you don't give it to somebody you don't know. You don't sell it to somebody you don't know. And you're careful about how you store it, because there's consequences for you.
So does New Zealand have a similar problem that Canada has then, where a lot of our shootings are taking place with guns that originate from the States that are smuggled in? Are they being smuggled into New Zealand?
No, but there are guns smuggled in, but New Zealand, of course, being an island, it's a lot harder. And that's one of the issues the States will also always have, is that there's the border with Mexico. It's just a sieve, right? It's harder, but you can purchase a weapon here legally if you're a licensed gun owner, which New Zealand's got less guns than Canada, but there's still quite a few, about 26, I think, per 100 persons. Yeah.
Still
quite a few. Then you can sell that weapon to somebody who doesn't have a license. And so New Zealand's got social problems, as we all do, and there's particularly a problem here with gangs.
So sorry to interrupt, Brendan, because I honestly believed up until right now that New Zealand had more stringent gun laws than Canada did. But what you're telling me changes my thought process, because everything you're describing, you can't do that in Canada. If I want to sell one of my guns, whether it's a restricted firearm or not, the recipient has to produce what's called a PAL, possession acquisition license, your firearms license, that would have had to have had a background check. There's no scenario in Canada that's legal where that transaction will be allowed to happen currently.
Is there an agency, Chris, where it's like, say you wanted to sell me a gun?
Yeah, it all goes through what's called the CFO, the Chief Firearms Officer in every province.
There's a central database of guns in Canada?
Sorry, say that again?
Does Canada have a central database of guns, much like a vehicle registry?
So we do for what's called restricted firearms, which is pistols and anything that has a high capacity detachable magazine that was considered an assault style rifle, which is now banned. They're called restricted firearms. So they are registered. I get a piece of paper. I am only allowed to take that to and from a range. I need that paperwork with me at all times. And the police force knows I have those guns. Then we have non-restricted firearms, like, a shotgun or a hunting rifle or whatever, that do not have a registry. We had a registry before, but it was costing 60 billion times more money than was planned, and the successive government scrapped that. So yes, we have a registry, but not for all of our guns, only guns that they consider to be restricted firearms. But that being said, whatever gun I want to sell, like there's a couple of websites where you can gun swap weapons and things like that. The buyer and the seller have to have valid licenses. That all goes through the CFO, who knows that transaction's happening, blah, blah, blah. That's how it happens.
Well, New Zealand, interestingly enough, had a registry. It was abolished in 1983, apparently.
Yeah, that's government against other successive governments changing. You know what I mean? I understand that being how that happens.
You can. The actual law is that you can sell a gun. There is penalty for selling a gun to someone without a valid license. It's $1,000 fine or 3 months in prison. But
yeah, but you're getting into illegal activity, which is exactly the crux of the
well,
problem.
you are. But yes, but so and that the accountability is still weak. I mean, it's basically untraceable.
Sure.
But I just want to say that, like, say someone commits a mass shooting with like a run of the mill 22. I don't know if I care if it gets smuggled in or not. But if it's an AR-15 and it's bought legally versus smuggled, I'm not sure I care about that either. I just care about the tool that they're using makes it so easy to kill somebody that I'm almost not, you know what I mean? Like I'm almost
James, and I've never been able to argue that. I can stand on my right-centric soapbox, if you will, and defend why I or whoever should be able to retain and use an AR-15. That being said, I have no argument for the fact that those weapons do not belong anywhere other than with military people. I have no argument to that.
Because I know a lot of people that support gun rights, they get really caught up in the classification of these weapons.
Correct.
As if the AR-15 not being technically an assault rifle is supposed to make anyone feel better.
Yeah.
You know, like
yeah.
I mean, what can you tell? Just because I'm stupid, I have no idea. Listen, I don't know anything about guns. I really don't. Can you tell me the definition of an assault rifle?
Okay, so we're clear here. AR does not stand for assault rifle.
Armalite.
It's Armalite rifles. The weapon was originally developed in 1955 as a replacement to the M1 carbine for Vietnam. When the patent ran out in 1977, anybody was allowed to basically make that same system.
Okay.
So it opened up that market. So that's when you're talking, but to get into the technicality, let's just say that an assault rifle is a high caliber rifle that is semi-automatic in nature and has a high capacity magazine that's detachable. So I can take a magazine off that holds, say, 30 rounds, which is normal, and replace and put another one on successively. And it's not bolt action. So a bolt action rifle, you have to fire one shot. This is your hunting rifle.
I just think of Lee Harvey Oswald whenever I think.
Actually, he used a bolt action rifle.
Yeah.
So it's not an automatic
Smoking
weapon.
Man used a handgun. Yeah.
It's not an automatic weapon where you hold the trigger down and it goes automatic. That's military only. But you can keep pulling the trigger and fire all 30 rounds, high velocity rounds in a light compact platform. That's what they are. And they are. And the only time I've ever agreed with Justin Trudeau in my life is that the AR-15 is designed to do one thing and one thing only. 100% correct. It's designed to kill people. That's why it was built.
Period.
And I know my gun buddies are going to be mad at me. I'm like, well, pound sand, because that's what it's made to do. That's why we carried it for 20 plus years of my career. That's what it does.
Was that the standard issue rifle or whatever for Canadian soldiers?
Most Western militaries use a variant thereof of a 5.56 millimeter, assault rifle. Whether it's AR
Braden, can you tell me, because I don't know a lot about guns, I get my knowledge of guns in your area of the world. I know it's not New Zealand, from Jim Jeffries and his famous gun rant about, well, I do. Are you familiar with that Jim Jeffries gun? What would you call it? A bit that he does or whatever, when he's on stage talking about the, I guess it was a mass shooting in Australia like 30 years ago or something like that. And Australia just decided, according to the stand-up comedy stylings of Jim Jeffries, decided to ban all guns, and everyone seemed kind of cool with that. Are you familiar with that at all?
I'm not. obviously, there was a massacre in Australia in 1996, which is probably what he's talking about.
Yeah, it was in Tasmania.
Yep. So no, I can't address his rant. Unfortunately, I haven't seen it.
Chris Rock had a better rant. He goes, "You want to stop mass shootings? Make ammunition $5,000 a bullet, and then see how many people get shot after that."
He must have been really mad at that motherfucker. He put 50 G's worth of bullets.
That's exactly it, right? Like, how mad are you gonna be? You got to remortgage your house to go like shoot somebody. You might want to think about that a couple times.
Yeah.
True.
I don't want to live in a society where the only thing that's stopping a nutter from mowing me down with an AK when I walk to the shopping mall is the fact that he can't get the AK. It's kind of a little bit. I think we can aim for something better than that potentially. It's possible. You can look around the world and in history, and you can see that it's possible to have a society where there is not a nutter looking at you in longing to possess an AK so that he can gun you down. The first initial issue is the fact people are wanting to try and kill these mass casualty events, and that's fairly recent phenomena. You can ban guns altogether and people can still get vehicles, right? And I've got the Nice attack open in a tab here, killed 86 people with a truck.
Yeah.
Well, and I agree with that. This is not defending me keeping my guns or any of that stuff. It's like somebody who wants to go kill people is going to find a way. They've been doing it since the Stone Age, beating somebody to death with a dinosaur bone. Up to, and if you look at the stats, there's more deaths by like knives and stabbing and other means than there is
by
guns.
bombs. I mean, right? I think Ariana Grande, a terror attack, was a bomb. There's been lots of bombs.
Sure. Well, that's my background, so I know all about that for sure.
There you go. Yeah. So in that sense, it's kind of, you don't want to look at the problem and go, okay, the problem is guns, ban them, and then find that the bad guys just find other ways to do it. But that's not.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But I mean, I think because that's sort of floating on the edges of guns don't kill people, but guns make it extraordinarily easy for people to kill people. Like if someone is really angry and they want to kill that person and that person is 50 feet away, they're not grabbing the knife and running at the guy ready to stab him. They're going to grab the gun. And
you're right, James. You're 100% correct. And those types of guns, which again, I own, do make it very easy to do it because that's what they're designed to do. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah. I just don't think that banning them solves what the problem is, especially in Canada, where it's theatrics saying that gun violence will go down because the lobbyists who put money in the liberals' pockets, sorry, I had to get that in there. Well,
you're in the Berta, right?
I'm in Berta. I got a rep, man. Come on. That's going to solve the problem. That is juvenile thinking. It's not going to solve the problem because you're not putting your resources into the real problem.
If you want to have a fun conversation, talk to a lawyer. Usually it's a criminal defense attorney. I talked to Rob Kiblikin about this, one of the sponsors for the network, my lawyer, about mandatory minimums for people smuggling guns from the United States to Canada. All of a sudden, the gun issue becomes a completely secondary issue next to the mandatory minimum, which apparently is anti-democratic. A mandatory minimum is what tyrannical governments use to oppress people. But I mean, there are certain crimes that already sort of have mandatory minimums. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if you're convicted of first-degree murder in this country, 25 years, no chance for parole until 25 years. That I believe is a mandatory minimum. I'm not sure.
I think that's the baseline. Yeah.
Yeah. If you, I don't know what the penalty is for smuggling a gun into Canada. It doesn't seem to be deterring anybody, though.
I'll tell you what, it's a lot less, and I want to get Rob on my pod because you just hit a nerve, is Canada's home defense or self-defense laws are an atrocity. Because for all the guys, I got these guns to protect my home. We don't have castle laws here. The States does.
Plus, you live in a trailer. Not you, but whoever you're imitating.
No, the buddy down the road does.
Right,
If you are only allowed to use an equal amount of force to defend yourself. Well, how the fuck you measure that is beyond me. But anyway, it basically works like this. And I don't want to go off on a tangent, but if you shoot somebody with your AR-15 or your pistol or your shotgun or whatever and kill them breaking in your house, you will immediately be arrested and will spend the bulk of your time trying to convince the system that you were defending yourself. There was a case in Ontario, it was a couple years ago. This gentleman was bound and gagged and tied up in his own home with a shotgun to his head, broke free, got the shotgun, shot and killed one guy, wounded the other, I think, and I may be mixing the story up, and I apologize if I am, and was immediately arrested and charged in jail and spent a year to clear his name before they threw it out. I mean, okay, so don't tell me your best weapon against a home invasion, and I tell this to people who go, Chris, what's the best gun I should get to defend myself? I'm like, for you, fucking none. Right here, 911. Speakerphone, throw it on the ground.
Get a dog.
Get a dog.
No, there's this stat.
Get cameras, get lights, create a tiered defense system, layered defense. The last thing you want to do in Canada is shoot somebody who breaks into your house because you are going to jail. 100%.
Unless it's an Indigenous person on your farmland.
Well, yeah, that's Saskatchewan guy. Funny how that fucking happened, right? You're not wrong, man. So that's a complicated subject in itself, is self-defense. But the first thing I tell people is you don't need an AR-15. First of all, an AR-15 is the worst weapon to defend your house with. A pistol is the second worst weapon, and these are the two weapons in question, because most people, even skilled people, especially when the adrenaline's going, trust me, you're not that good of a shot as you were. That is the worst weapon. Shotgun's horrible if you got kids or animals. Like, there's specific weapons that would be great home defense weapons, and most of the ones that are on this shit list are not ideal for home defense. And I'm telling you that as somebody who knows his guns.
A dog. Listen, I saw a stat, and I'm going to butcher it, but it was basically something like this. You have a greater chance of shooting a loved one with a gun in your house than you do and having your house broken into successfully
100%
than you would if you had a dog, because first of all, they avoid your house if they know you have a dog. And second of all, just like with the 12 gauge, as soon as someone hears a dog growling or barking, unless it's a fucking Shih Tzu, they're out.
Right? Absolutely. I got 3 dogs, and if the first thing they're going to do is run down the stairs and jump all over the guy and then show him where I hide all my valuables, right? And they're going to bark. But what do you think I'm going to do? Grab my AR from under my bed, which would have been illegally stored anyway, and come down blazing? No, that is absolutely preposterous. So, I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
In my case, I just step out of bed and I sleep naked. So I just point and go, I win, get the fuck out of my house.
Do you know what I do? Here's what I do.
I had to inject some humor in there, guys.
I put on a black suit with a black tie, and I walk down the stairs with a copy of the Watchtower magazine and say, "Hey, have you accepted Jesus Christ into your life?" And they fucking leave.
Braden?
Sorry.
No.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I've got white books. Yeah, you'll know what those are, James.
Yeah, that's right. Braden, by the way,
PBCC.
Yeah, that's right. He's an ex-member of the PBCC, and we're and I invited him on the show to talk about guns. That'll be our next your next appearance on the show, because that's a whole thing in and of itself. If we go back to Sandy Hook just for a moment, and we go back to the United States, I even heard people. Do you remember this when after it happened? People, like, there were some serious discussions, and this happened a couple other times in the shootings that followed over the next 10 years of teachers being armed.
Yeah.
And like armed guards walking around the school and all this stuff. And then I think Dave Chappelle had a really interesting bit about how his one of his kids was doing like They were running drills at school for if there was like a
active
mass
shooter drills. Yeah, James, I
And
remember that bit.
That's
Active
right.
shooter drill.
And the
That's
bit was
fucking
based
insane down there.
That's right. And the bit was like, why don't you're going to tell one of these students might be a future active shooter, and now you're telling them how you're going to handle it. So of course he's just going to go straight to like the hall monitor, whatever it was, shoot that guy first, shoot a couple teachers that might have guns, and then he knows he's safe until the cops get there. And what do the cops do? Wait outside because they don't want to go in for some reason.
But think of the curriculum balance when it comes to time, because since they canceled half of U.S. history, they have time to teach active shooter drills to the kids. Wow. Yeah. Well, you guys are killing it out down there. I mean, unbelievable.
Literally.
I had a conversation with an author in the U.S., well-known author. I'm not going to say her name, but we were back and forth on Twitter, and she was talking about how, today they had an active shooter drill at my niece's school, and she came home traumatized. And I went, "What's an active shooter drill? Well, I don't understand. What is that?" This is about 7 years ago, and she explained it to me, and I go,
"Yeah,
I've never heard of that before." She goes, "How could you not have heard of this?" And I go, "I live in Canada." "Oh, you don't do that there?" I'm like, "No, we don't." I mean, yeah, we have a lot of people that own guns here, and yes, gun crime does happen here, but we don't traumatize our children.
We do now.
Oh, wow.
Wow, Jen, your kids did an act.
Jen,
that's
Jesus.
And Jen's in Ontario, right? Jen, you're in Toronto.
Yeah, North York
area.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the first I've ever heard of that.
That's a sad thing to have to do. It really is.
Yep.
I can't believe. Do you have active shooter drills in New Zealand, Brendan?
No, definitely not. I remember seeing a photograph from an American school of where they actually had tape on the floor where the kids had to stand in the event of a drill where they would be out of sight from the hallway. So they're not just a drill; they're actually they're fitting out the classrooms.
This is like an extension of duck and cover. Remember the nuclear bomb drills that they used to do?
But back to your actual point, James, about the teachers being armed and things like that. I know a lot of teachers, and they want to teach and educate kids. They thought, they're hearing about this in the States. But the minute they say, I need to take firearms training and have a gun in my desk, is the day I'm going to find a new career.
Yeah,
you're band-aiding a problem by saying, well, we're gonna put security guards, armed security all over these schools, and we're gonna
it's a prison.
It becomes a prison for sure, and teach, have armed teachers. I'm going, that's not solving your problem. Your problem is an overabundance of firearms, easy access to it, and not managing it. That it's one of those bullshit Band-Aid solution things that's not a root cause solution to a problem.
Plus, think about how much teachers get paid in the States. And now you're going to be asking them to like arm themselves?
Less than what cops get paid. Yeah, it's preposterous. And what trauma, you think of the mental development cycle of a child, especially when they get into the adolescent years of, you're teaching them that this is the norm. This is the free world. This is what we have to do. It's absurd. It's insane that's the world that these kids have to live in, where they're doing active shooter drills because of a mismanaged problem.
It's an interesting thing, though. I mean, both New Zealand and Canada come from a similar background in many ways, and we look at the United States and the country's problems, and they're easy to criticize, and there's a lot of them.
Oh yeah.
But America still somehow seems to work, and people go there. It's a bit like we stand back, and in New Zealand we're we tend to be a bit smug about this kind of thing, and a lot of our problems we don't have simply because of geography. A lot of problems we find overseas. America works somehow.
It works. It's funny you say that, because I go to the States a lot, and I just came back from Denver 2 days ago. Denver's a pretty left loose, it's like Calgary. And it was interesting because for the first time ever, I heard Americans telling me that their country is fucked.
Yeah, I've been hearing that a lot lately.
Not one or two or three,
many,
like 90%.
Yeah.
Not this flag waving bullshit that you're used to. Like, America's the greatest country in the world. And this was not just people from Denver, because I went to a Broncos Chiefs game. Chiefs won, of course. Thank you very much. People come in from all over the States, right, to see this game. And you're just sitting in the bar talking about politics and things like that. And more Americans know how divided and fucked up the country is, and they're saying that and speaking out. So I found that to be very interesting. So I agree with you. Yeah, they make it work, but do they?
Well,
it feels like
the more interesting side of it is that the fact is how many immigrants they still seem to get. Immigration is quite an interesting phenomenon. I mean, the Iron Curtain was put up to stop people from leaving, right? And you can kind of stance on the head of a pin. America does attract people somehow.
Sure, it's a land of opportunity. Economically, right now, I'm going to New Zealand before I'm going to move to America.
Well, just to sort of circle back to something that we mentioned before and what you mentioned now, I have a pretty fitting, albeit satirical, clip of Americans and guns. So,
I'd like to buy your deadliest gun, please.
Aisle 6, next to the sympathy cards. Whoa, careful there, Annie Oakley.
I don't have to be careful. I got a gun.
Well, you'll probably want the accessory kit, holster,
Oh, yeah.
bandolier,
Baby.
silencer, loudener, speed cocker,
Ooh, I like the sound of that.
and this is for shooting down police helicopters.
Oh, I don't need anything like that. Yet. Just give me my gun.
Sorry, the law requires a 5-day waiting period. We've got to run a background check.
5 days? But I'm mad now.
you know,
That's the one I was talking about earlier.
yeah. I just found it, so I thought I'd put it
I
up
love
here.
that.
That is mint.
But it's fun. But it doesn't seem like satire.
No.
Okay, so let me speak to that, because I've been in American gun shops in some pretty right-wing states, and I'm not gonna lie, man. It is almost like that. Like the satirical scale past reality is there, and you think it's there.
It's much
like
closer.
that. The rebel flag in the background, I'm like, of course that's in the background. You know, it's very much like that.
What was the episode of Family Guy when they moved to Texas, and Brian the dog goes to the liquor store and says, "Yeah, I'd like a bottle of whiskey. Here's your bottle of whiskey, and here's your gun." Gun? I don't want a gun. He goes, "No, Texas state law. Buy a bottle of whiskey, get a free gun."
Have a gun. It reminds me of that. When did you guys? Who here's everybody's seen Bowling for Columbine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And when
The bank thing. Yeah.
the bank thing, he goes in, opens a bank account, and I don't know what state it was.
Little hyperbole in there, though.
Right.
He did get the rifle, but they don't hand it to you that day.
But you get a free gun for opening a bank.
You get a free gun.
account. A free gun. Here's
Yeah,
your
a free rifle.
checking account. Here's your card. Yeah, it's tap enabled. Don't worry about it.
And that was
here's
Colorado
your
too, if I
gun.
recall correctly.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't remember, so I don't want to cite it. I don't know.
I mean,
think it was
Either
Colorado.
Texas, Colorado, wherever. It doesn't matter.
you do
A
have to
free
remember
gun,
he did manipulate it a little bit. He did.
he always does. That's Michael Moore. That's fair.
Yeah, he does. But he's factual in the sense that you open a checking account for $5,000, we will give you a free rifle.
Yeah.
Now, it's like you open the account has to be in good standing order for something like 60 or 90 days, and then you get your free rifle. It's not handed to you that day. And they don't hand you ammunition either. Oh, by the way, they don't hand
Here,
it to you in the
if you
bank.
switch to RBC
But-
today, you get some AirPods.
Yeah.
Down there, you get a gun.
That's disgusting.
You get a gun. There's a huge difference, right?
Big difference.
I mean, and again, I'm not a gun owner. I don't ever want to own a gun. Everybody knows I'm a center left. I'm very much into strong social safety net programs. I don't make a secret of that. But one of the things that we always stress on our podcast is facts and truth are important, and we will always tell the truth, and we always will be factual. Yeah, I think that's a better idea.
Yeah,
See,
me
Paul,
too.
and I'm center right. You and I could go and hang out and have a beer and have a rational conversation.
Absolutely. Without question. Most of my buddies, I was just at my Scotch and Cigar Club. They're all, well, I'd say about 75% are center right. but we
Or at
agree
least
on
we're center,
so
because it
much.
feels like center is an antiquated word
It's not,
or
though.
position.
It's not. Because you and I are
I'm a
not that
radical
far
centrist,
apart.
so
A radical centrist.
actually,
I
I'm
guarantee you, Chris, you and I are not that far apart. And
No.
in all likelihood, our upbringing was eerily similar. Military kid, grew up on military bases my whole
Yeah.
life. So I never served, but I would probably have an understanding that you and I could sit down and agree and have a conversation about things that maybe, I'll say in air quotes, civilians wouldn't get. I am a civilian, however.
You're a base brat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a different knowledge base there, right?
Well, it's the mindset. It's just I cannot get my head around, and I know we're talking guns and everything, but the polarization with politics is either you're extreme left and you hate everything on the extreme right, and it just keeps going like that. I'm like, I didn't grow up that way. I never.
No.
I can't get my head around this. How the hell did we get here?
Well,
Well,
and
it's
we
funny
used to
'cause
flip flop.
different
We used to flip
podcast.
flop liberal to progressive conservative.
Sure. Who's doing the
Right?
right things? Like, I as much as it's, I don't want to mention his name, the current serving prime minister. I don't think the guy coming in that hopefully replace him. It's because we don't vote people in here. We just vote people out.
That's
We're
right.
done with you. We're going to take this dick next.
Mhm.
But it's just so polarized. And it's like to circle back to guns. If I say I'm pro gun, the far left, except for somebody who's left
Immediately,
center, just attacks me. Why? Because
Yeah.
they're programmed to do that because they're extreme left. And the extreme right guys, and I know a lot of them, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, well, hang on a second. Maybe there's some merit to this. As fucked up as they've done it. Like that's what I'm trying to stay in the middle.
Yeah.
Well, on guns, I'm probably really, really far left. But Chris, you and I already agreed on what I think is a major point, which is like, I don't think I should be legally allowed to own a firearm, but I'm fine that you are because of your background and training.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think you should be legally allowed to own a firearm if you are adequately and competently trained. You've had a sufficient background check and maybe even follow-up background checks to assess your mental condition if you're into restricted firearms. I think there's many ways to do it that lets me or somebody else who's a recreational shooter keep their AR-15 by having checks and balances. But can I put my hand on my heart and say, I'm entitled to, I need this? No, I don't. Do I like shooting it? Yeah, but I spent 20 years shooting it. It's like a mechanic has his own tools at home. Maybe that's a shitty analogy, but that's what I'm using.
Not really. Not really.
I'm comfortable with
I
it.
think that's a fair analogy. And look, somebody like me who is secret cleared, I was top secret for a bit. I could, if I wanted to, I could go out and buy a gun tomorrow.
Sure.
If I wanted to. Here's the reason I don't have them. I don't like them, and also I have depression and anxiety.
So that's
The medication.
self-aware
medication.
decision, and I respect
Yes.
that.
The medication works, but some days it doesn't. And
Yeah.
and when you're sitting there thinking of the terrible things you can do to yourself. I know where the carotid artery is. I have a Bowie knife, but I know how much of a mess that makes and how
If
long
your
that
brain
takes.
goes there, you should not be around firearms. I don't
Because a
disagree with
firearm is like that, right? It's
Yeah.
instant. It's done. It's finished.
But I mean, like for me, it's like, well, what do you need an AR-15? I get that from a million people. I said, well, let me tell you something. I worked for the Canadian government, and we would get to go to the range outside of pre-deployment training to go to Afghanistan, Bosnia, or wherever, once a year. So what we did was bought the same guns that were issued in the Army, bought our own ammo. The RCMP do the exact same thing, by the way, because they got no money to keep their skill sets up to do their jobs. And we would go do range practices on our own to ensure that we were good to go. That's what we did. Because there was an underfunded military. Hey, news flash for all you people out there. The Canadian military is not funded well. That is all.
No.
So we would go buy our own weapons
know.
that were like weapons and buy our own ammo and go do our own training together. And we did that for decades. So now I'm out of the Army. Yeah, I still have my AR. I like it. I want to keep it. Do I need it? No, not the point. I like it. Because
Braden,
if
do
you
you
really
have-
want to segue, It's
No.
not about guns to me. Here's where I'm going to go a little right. So hang on to your hats. It's how it's being pushed through that is not following what I consider due process. And what's he going to do next that he doesn't like? It's easy to focus on guns. Here, look, smoke and mirrors over here. Oh, now we're going to ban this, change that, do that, do that. But that's a whole other segue conversation. There's my conspiracy theory comment for the night. It's how I feel
You
that
can come on our podcast for that
a
conversation.
narcissistic fool is managing our country. And what a shit show this latest C21 amendment is. I'm like, do you know what you're doing before you make key decisions? Do you actually understand what you're doing? Because you're pushing a bill through that has so many holes in it. No pun intended, because we're talking about guns. I'm not confident in your ability to make actual decisions. You're worried about guns, but I had to get my buddy bring back children's Tylenol from fucking Mexico to hook up my buddy Grant Johnson because his kids can't get meds because it doesn't have French language on it.
But hang on
Yes,
a second.
but
Chris, that's
easy,
not-
but easy,
that's not
but
his
easy
doing,
with
though.
easy with the gun puns. Okay, I'm just happy that you're climbing out of your shell. But easy with the gun
I am
puns.
done now. Thank you for your putting up with that.
The language thing has nothing to do with the prime minister. These are laws that are in place, and he can't just summarily change them without rewriting the Constitution.
Like does it with guns.
Well, no, because it's legislation. Nothing's been passed yet.
We need Tylenol. Get it in here. That's what we need.
No argument there. No argument there. But I mean, we got to look at the bigger picture and all the things involved. And I know you're
right.
You're
right, Paul.
you're a
and
smart
there's
enough
definitely
man to make that
changes that need to
observation.
be made there. But I swear to God, I had my buddy bring back children's Tylenol from Mexico.
Oh, I've no doubt.
Because
I've
his
no doubt.
kids have been sick for 3 months because it's that time of year for kids, and you cannot get it anywhere. And we're babbling back and forth about not just guns, stupid shit in this country. And
why isn't that Shoppers Drug Mart's fault?
But
Why
they're
is that
having the
Justin
same
Trudeau?
I
problem
don't
in the
know the
US,
background
though.
on it, so I'm ranting. But it's
No, there's the same problem is happening in the United States right now. There are shortages
right?
of Tylenol in the United States and have been for weeks. This is
Johnson & Johnson is probably just trying to raise their stock price. Like
well,
really.
different
What's going on?
company.
Viva
but sure.
Mexico. You can get it there.
Johnson & Johnson is
book a
Tylenol?
swoop flight down to
No.
PV and load up your kid.
Who owns
Anyway.
Tylenol?
I don't
It's
know.
not J&J.
No?
I've had friends who work for J&J. That's not one of their products.
Oh, McNeil Laboratories, and now part of the Johnson & Johnson Pharmaceutical Conglomerate.
I don't know who owns
Under the
Tylenol.
umbrella.
Get on the Google machine.
Yeah.
Put the Googler in there. Put it in
Brendan,
there.
you guys have Tylenol in New Zealand?
I'm getting a pretty amazing background on Canadian pharmaceutical supplies. Yeah, I thought
Hey,
you
you
guys
got-
were.
Wait,
got a
you
lot
I
of
thought
meth.
you guys were better than the United States. I mean, California's trying to build their own drugs factories now, but it's quite bad in Canada too. Yeah.
Well,
Listen, if you got children's Tylenol, DM me later. I can make some money off this.
Oh, in New Zealand, yeah, it's just a case of DHLing it, I suppose.
yeah.
Possibly.
One of the things that is happening here, and I had a conversation with a fella earlier this evening, is that we're starting to manufacture vaccines in Canada again, which we used to do, and then it was sold off by which prime minister? Can you tell me?
You want to go there, Paul? You
Oh,
really want to go there?
Yeah,
Okay.
not the current one.
No, it was sold off by Brian Mulroney. And here's the best part.
Yeah.
The guy I was having the conversation with is a staunch, dyed-in-the-wool progressive conservative. And I go, but he sold it. And he goes, yeah, you're right. He did do that.
Yeah. I'll
He did do that.
concede failure by any government.
Yeah. Oh, and me too. Because I don't belong to any political party, and I never will. I am center-left, but I do not belong to a party. I never, ever will. And I will call out any party who does a bad thing every single time.
Well, and I think so. We're kind of aligned on that because as a member of the military, I can't count how many governments I went through. I did 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. You serve the government in power, and all I cared about was one thing: am I going to be properly equipped, trained to go where you send me? If you meet those three things, I'm a pretty happy guy. And I know that's a simplistic view, but most members of the military, and I guess I'm speaking for a lot of people who might disagree with me, didn't give a shit whether it was the conservatives, the liberals,
At all.
It was like, are you going to sufficiently equip us and fund us to be able to do what you expect us to do? If you do that, we're good. That was
yeah,
it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'll tell you right now, like where I was pro-liberal, Stephen Harper, who I was kind of a fan of, he took a lot of credit for a lot of equipment we had in Afghanistan. But you know who ordered that equipment? Paul Martin.
Oh, Paul Martin. That's right. Yeah.
Paul
yeah.
Martin.
That's right. Yeah.
Paul Martin, the Liberal government, made some snap decisions and fast-tracked a horrible procurement process and got us a bunch of good stuff that got us into Afghanistan. But by the time it arrived, Stephen Harper's government was in play. So they kind of went, yeah, we're doing great over there.
He did that a lot. He did that when the financial crisis didn't impact Canada as much as it impacted the States. He took credit for that too, even though he tried to pass the same Glass-Steagall Act type banking law here that would have merged commercial and investment banking that would have totally fucked us.
And I'm not shitting on Stephen Harper. I'm just saying I know which governments did what that enabled me and the people like me to be successful at what they asked us to go and do. So
which government got us the current fighter jets that we've still been using since 1983, 84 when we first got them? Who purchased that?
Which one was that? You were broke.
The CF-18.
Have you decided whether you're going to buy
83? Keep going backwards, man. 81.
No, it was purchased in
1981.
So they were purchased in 78. We started to get the deliveries in 81 through 83. And who purchased them?
Correct. That's a typical procurement cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, that was Pierre Trudeau who purchased them.
Wow.
Yep. And guess what?
True.
His son, who I'm not a big fan of, we're not doing fondue on Wednesdays. But anyway, he just signed the deal to get 80 whatever F-35s.
That's right.
That being said, we could have got him way cheaper if he would have did this back when it was a thing, and they objected to it. But that's normal government shit, so I'm not going to like bomb him with that because that could flip-flop either way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he pulled the trigger, so our Air Force is about to get state-of-the-art when however long that procurement cycle is going to be. So it's
he ran on the platform of wanting to cancel that contract, and I spoke to a buddy of mine who, a couple of friends of mine who are I can't say who they are or what they do, but let's just say they were in the know, and we'll leave it at that.
Well, Canada's got a lot of money invested into that project, so
that was
sorry,
the thing.
James, we're jacking your pod here, man.
Oh, it's fine.
But that was the thing they had.
I'm interested in the conversation.
We had billions of dollars invested into the project with a supply chain set up for the next 30 years.
Absolutely.
There are millions of jobs involved. So I think what happened was somebody sat down and said, if you cancel this, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, oh, shit. Okay, let it fall by the wayside and then we'll buy them in a couple of years.
No, in my mind, that's one of the only good military decision by this government thus far was to pull the trigger on that. And I don't care about the back end. And I care about jobs in Canada and all that great stuff too. But it's like we have got to finally get a modern fighter craft that can interact because we don't operate alone anymore. Everything has got the word joint in front of it. Wherever we go, it's joint. And the F-35 allows for a complete networking no matter what country's in the air to be able to create that interoperability. So it's a big deal.
Tell me a single pilot in the Canadian Armed Forces, Canadian Air Force right now, that is as old as the aircraft they're flying in.
Oh, none.
None.
And like the allowable air hours on an F-18, there was American pilots come up and do exchanges when I was teaching cold weather survival in Cold Lake. And they're like, I'm not flying that. You're not even allowed to fly that in the United States. It's miled out.
Well, I had a buddy who was a Sea King, worked with the Sea Kings.
I've been in one of those too.
Okay, so the aircraft. Sorry, I'm getting political, but how can I help it, James? You know me. When Chrétien
you guys are jacking the show in the best way possible. So please,
I feel
when Chrétien ran, he was like, "I'm going to cancel the helicopter."
I would just kick you off if I felt bad about it. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, anyway,
you're talking about the H-101.
The H-101. So Chrétien said, "I'm going to cancel the helicopter," and we went, "No, don't do that. We've already spent a lot of money, and the aircraft that are flying are older than the pilots, and I'm going to cancel the GST." He didn't cancel the GST. He canceled the EH-101. It cost us almost $1 billion.
Which we got anyway, which is the Cormorant.
Which we ended up getting, several years later. Meanwhile,
if we wait long enough, this can be 7 times more expensive. So let's go that route.
Well, not to mention the fact that the amount of money spent to keep the Sea King flying during that time,
Yeah.
the amount of lives lost, the penalties that were paid. But he didn't cancel the GST, and John Nunziata got kicked out of the party for asking him why he didn't cancel it. So again, like I said, center left, but I will
See,
call out
I
a
respect
son of
that.
a bitch when they pull son of a bitch moves.
No, I'm
Okay,
the same
good.
way. That's why I stay center right.
I think what we'll do. I don't want to try to circle back because that'll feel forced. But listen, we started off this conversation talking about Sandy Hook and gun control. We finished off talking about politics. It really, if I may try to clumsily squish them together, it will be politics that, unfortunately, that we'll have to rely on in order to prevent the next Sandy Hook. So maybe it's a good thing that we've sort of evolved into that conversation. I'd like to thank Army Chris from the Fire and Effect podcast. I'd like to thank Paul Atkinson from the Eager Beaver podcast, and Braden Simmons from New Zealand.
New Zealand.
Hey, Brady.
Yeah. I appreciate you guys coming. I really do. I thought it was
James.
a really stimulating conversation, and I'd love to have all of you back. But thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again soon, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you
brother.
bet. Take care, guys.
Good one, guys.
Thanks, James.
Thank you, Braden. I appreciate it, buddy. Okay. That was a fun conversation. I like when conversations sort of fluid, through fluidity, take on a whole path of their own. But just to, again, circle back, it is the 10th anniversary of Sandy Hook. And I feel like it probably is a fitting thing to start, or sort of to end the show the way I started the show. And I will do so by reading the following names: Noah, Anna Grace, Dawn, Vicky, Charlotte, Jack, Olivia, Mary, Dylan, Catherine, Aviel, Jessica, Rachel, James, Josephine, Caroline, Lauren, Ben, Madeline, Jesse, Allison, Chase, Daniel, Anne-Marie, Grace, and Emily. Those were the victims of the Sandy Hook tragedy. And I think that they've become the unfortunate ambassadors of gun violence. And, I'm hopeful that one day, the United States might learn their lesson, and other countries as well, including our own. And we'll see you next time on Blackballed.
Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed.